In 2013, a mega blockbuster animated movie launched one of the biggest songs of all time, as well as a million lunchboxes and dress-ups. But word has it that Elsa and Anna aren't the only things at Disney that are frozen. Yep, it's time to look at that legend. Seems like everyone's heard it. It's been denied over and over, but it just won't go away. Some people even say the film was only made to mess up Google searches about the rumours. So, was the most loved animator of all time really frozen in liquid nitrogen when he died? Does he, even now, rest in a vault somewhere under Disneyland? And what about the reports that he'll be thawed out any day now and return to take charge of Disney Corp after 50 years? With hidden tunnels, mad scientists, and creepy frozen corpses that occasionally defrost, there may actually be a bit more truth in this story than you think. So, let's find out if Walt Disney really did build a snowman out of himself.
In Santa Fe, you find yourself in a bygone time. Another world. The clock has turned back in half a century, and you're in the main square of a small American town.
In the 65 years he definitely wasn't frozen, Walter Elias Disney changed the face of not just films, TV and stage shows, but theme parks too. He created some of the most beloved characters of all time, won Emmys, Golden Globes, and more Oscars than anyone else ever, as well as founding the happiest place on earth. That now draws an incredible 62 million visitors a year. But by 1965, a lifetime of smoking was catching up with him. In late 1966, he was diagnosed with lung cancer and had a lung removed. After collapsing at home on November 30th of that year, he was rushed to hospital, where he died at 9:30 a.m. on December the 15th. 2 days later, he was cremated, and his ashes now rest at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Well, that's the official version, but as we'll see next, reports soon began to circulate that Walt had other ideas in mind. The story that Walt had his body cryogenically frozen to be revived later seemed to appear almost as soon as he'd passed. But where would such a crazy notion come from, if it wasn't true? Just a few weeks later, at the beginning of 1967, a reporter from a tabloid called the National Spotlight is said to have disguised himself as a medical orderly and snuck into St. Joseph's, the hospital close to Disney HQ in Burbank, and came across the recently deceased Walt suspended in an ice-cold metal cylinder hidden in a storeroom. So is this where the rumour began? Perhaps, but there's no record of a publication called the National Spotlight. And how did the reporter know it was him? Cryogenic cylinders don't usually have windows. Was there a Sleeping Beauty tag on it? St. Joseph's Hospital is the place where Walt passed, but some sources claim the story actually came from a group of Disney animators. Either way, once the story was out of the box, there was no stopping it. In 1969, the French magazine Ici Paris and the US National Tatler both repeated the claims and added to them, alleging that Disney was resting comfortably beneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, and that he would be thawed out in 1975, which definitely didn't happen, so at least we can prove that bit of the story wrong. But wait one moment, was this sort of cryogenics even possible in the 60s? The idea of freezing someone at the point of death to preserve them until medical science had progressed enough to not just bring them back to life, but cure whatever killed them in the first place? Incredibly, the answer is yes. The idea of suspended animation had been around for centuries. Even Benjamin Franklin gave the idea some thought. But with advances in medicine during the 1950s and 60s, a few scientists began to seriously look at the idea. Experiments took place to cryo-freeze mice, with a lot of buzz in the press. Then, in 1964, just 2 years before Disney's death, a maths and physics teacher named Robert Ettinger wrote a book titled The Prospect of Immortality. Now, often called the father of cryogenics, he set out the scientific case. Despite his clear conclusion that the technology didn't exist yet, the book caused a sensation. As Ettinger explained, it's no big deal to actually preserve someone. As soon after death as possible, the body needs to be gradually cooled to prevent cell damage. The blood is then replaced with chemicals called cryoprotectants, designed to prevent ice crystals forming by turning the fluids and organs in the body into an almost solid glass-like form. Finally, the body is placed into a double-walled cylinder like a giant thermos flask and slowly chilled to around -320 degrees Fahrenheit using liquid nitrogen. If kept at that temperature, it'll last indefinitely. But the difficult bit, as Ettinger said, would be reviving them again. There are organisms that can survive being frozen and will come back to life. Recently, worms that froze solid around 46,000 years ago were successfully reanimated. A rabbit's kidney has been removed, frozen, then thawed out and successfully transplanted into another animal. Even today, though, the technology to do anything similar with people just doesn't exist. Could it be that Walt, knowing his time was near, had read the book and decided to make the technology exist? We'll find out next. There's no doubt Disney did have a strong interest in future technologies. His documentaries introduced the world to the idea of space travel. Tomorrowland and Epcot, the experimental prototype city of tomorrow, were supposed to show how Americans would live in future. What if he also decided it would show them how to live forever? Some of his biographers claimed that's exactly what happened. Leonard Mosley, in his 1986 book titled Disney's World, and Mark Elliott's Hollywood's Dark Prince, published in 1993, both state that Walt was obsessed with the thought of his own death and how to prevent it, and that he did read Ettinger's book. According to Mosley, the chief problem that troubled Walt was the length of time it might take the doctors to perfect the process. How long would it be before the surgical experts could bring a treated cadaver back to working life? And there was a reason he wanted to return. Could he be brought back in time to rectify the mistakes his successors would almost certainly start making at Epcot the moment he was dead? Mosley even alleged that Walt ordered that his lung, removed before his death, also be preserved, so it could be repaired and surgically reattached, ready for his new life. It's also said he ordered his brother, Roy, to delay news of his death, then announced that a secret funeral and cremation had already happened, to allow time for the freezing process to take place and avoid any doubts about who was in the coffin. There are no sources for any of this, though, and neither of these biographies is exactly trustworthy, getting even basic facts wrong. The exact nature and seriousness of his illness was kept secret, but his death was revealed within hours. And there's no mystery about the private funeral, say critics. Walt was known to hate them himself and expressed the wish that things were done as simply and speedily as possible. So, is that the end of the story? Well, this is where a former TV repairman named Robert Nelson comes in. Like millions of others, he'd read Ettinger's book too, and was so inspired by it that he decided to stop fixing TVs and start freezing people instead. On December the 15th, 1966, the very day that Walt Disney died, the state of California approved incorporation papers for the Cryogenic Society. It seemed to be a professional organisation with an impressive advisory board of top scientists and plush offices in Los Angeles. Its president was Robert Nelson. Though he claimed the purpose of the society was research into the subject, less than a month later, on January the 12th, 1967, he himself helped a doctor and a chemist carry out the first ever attempt to freeze someone with the idea of reanimating them later. The patient was a 73-year-old psychology professor named James Bedford. Is it just coincidence that this happened at exactly the same time as Walt Disney's death? Maybe not. The freezing of James Bedford turned Bob Nelson into a media star, and during an interview with the LA Times in 1972, he caused another sensation, saying that Uncle Walt missed out on the chance to be the first person in history to be frozen. Later, the story emerged that Bob had received a phone call sometime before the great man's death. A woman calling herself an associate of the Walt Disney Studio had asked him numerous questions about cryopreservation, what facilities were available, and how many patients had already undergone the procedure. As Nelson himself hadn't frozen anyone at that point and didn't yet have any facilities, the call soon ended, and according to Nelson, he heard no more. Independent witnesses have confirmed that such a call did really happen. So was it maybe just a researcher thinking about a new show? Or was Walt secretly looking at the idea? Perhaps he decided it was impossible. Or just maybe, could he have decided to create the technology to do it himself? There's no evidence, but it's got to be said that if Disney did decide to go it alone, that was a smart move. Though he seems to have been motivated by the best of intentions, Bob Nelson's Cryogenic Society wasn't the slick, efficient operation it appeared. More, Mickey Mouse. They were pretty much making things up as they went along, and in 1971 came disaster. Due to a pump failure, 9 preserved bodies being stored at a cemetery vault in northern Los Angeles thawed out, leading to expensive lawsuits from the families. At this point, Bob Nelson went back to repairing TVs for a living. It wasn't the end for cryogenics, though. In 1972, Alcor was formed, a much more professional organisation. Today, it's estimated that they and other companies like the Cryogenics Institute store the remains of a few hundred people worldwide. Among them are the father of cryogenics, Robert Ettinger, along with his first wife, second wife, and mother. Sharing flask space with them is Bob Nelson himself. Oh, and if you're interested in being preserved, you can join the waiting list. Prices start at around $26,000 if you just want your head saved. One of the other bodies also still preserved is the very first, James Bedford, the man frozen just weeks after Walt Disney's own death. And he's apparently in good shape. So if Walt did create his own personal cryogenic plant somewhere, there's no reason he couldn't still be well preserved too, patiently waiting for the technology that could revive and cure him. The Disney family and company insiders have repeatedly dismissed the idea. According to Disney's daughter Diane, there is absolutely no truth to the rumour that my father, Walt Disney, wished to be frozen. I doubt that my father had ever heard of cryonics. But, like the people in these flasks, the story doesn't want to die. In 2021, more claims popped up, saying the unfreezing would happen that December. As with the very first rumours, this turned out to be more tabloid satire than truth. And anyway, as we've seen, the technology still isn't available, unless in some secret lab at Epcot, they've invented it. Maybe we just want it to be true. The characters Walt created will live forever. At some level, we believe that he must be able to as well. But there's still that unexplained phone call from Disney to Bob Nelson, wanting to know all about cryogenics. So let's roll with it. If Walt really was frozen, where might he be now? It's said that sometime after Disneyland in California opened, Walt was doing the rounds in Tomorrowland when suddenly a cowboy wandered by on his way to work in Frontierland. Disney felt that happenings like this could ruin the magic for his guests, so a small underground tunnel was created to let cast members move about unseen. Because the park in Anaheim was already built, it would have been impossible to add many more tunnels. But in planning his new Magic Kingdom in Florida, Walt took this idea to whole new heights, ordering a massive subterranean network crisscrossing the whole park and covering an incredible 392,000 square feet. In some places, there are 2 stories deep. Known as utilidors, the tunnels don't just allow workers to move around, but contain waste management systems, storage warehouses, kitchens, staff canteens and locker rooms, offices, rehearsal rooms, even a hair salon. But was there more to the idea of hidden tunnels? Is it possible something else is under there too? Though Walt himself planned the park, it was still under construction at the time of his death, being completed under the control of Roy Disney. So what more perfect place for Walt himself to rest, waiting for technology to catch up and bring him back to take control once again. Often it's said that he's in a vault beneath the Pirates of the Caribbean ride, but the deepest and most complex part of the utilidor system is right beneath Cinderella's castle. It's an area containing the digital animation control system that monitors lighting, stage curtains, and hundreds of animatronic figures, literally the heart of the whole park, where the magic really does happen. Wouldn't it be great if Walt himself was there too, still watching over things, perhaps ready to one day move into the most exclusive location in any of the parks, the unique Cinderella Castle Suite itself, that some say was built especially for his return. Only time will tell. So, what do you think? Will Walt Disney return one day? Let us know in the comments. If you enjoyed this video, check out our other stories here and help us carry on creating new ones by liking and subscribing. Thanks for watching.